I'm Hank Lynch. I'm the CEO of Reston Association. We're down here at the boat launch on Lake Thoreau, and I've asked Larry Butler, our Chief Operating Officer, and someone who's been managing these lakes for well over 20 years, to help me understand why we're having such a severe algae bloom this year, why the hydrilla has gotten into the lakes, and why it's impacting our boating, and actually just to share with me some of the realities and the facts. Are we having fish kills? Have we seen turtle losses? The severity of it. My first question, Larry, is you've been managing the lakes for well over 20 years. Is that?
Well over.
And this is not the first time we've had a pretty severe algae bloom, is it?
We have algae blooms almost every year. Not every year on Lake Thoreau. There was a small algae bloom last year, though, on Lake Thoreau. When conditions are right, regardless of the lake, if you've got the right amount of nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen primarily, and you've got ample sunlight and heat, which certainly we had that in July with
Right.
23 or so days over 90 degrees, it creates a situation that's ripe for an algae bloom. And the blue-green algae that's in the lake now, it has a competitive advantage over all the other algae species that are in the lake all the time. You just don't see them. The blue-green algae, they fix atmospheric nitrogen. So they have a competitive advantage. If there's adequate phosphorus in the lake from runoff, fertilizers, roadway runoff and things like that, blue-green can outcompete all the other algae in the lake because they take nitrogen, which is the other main nutrient, and they bloom when those conditions are right. And so that's what happened here. And in this situation, it came right on the heels of us treating for hydrilla, which in and of itself is one of the most invasive exotic aquatic plants in the country. And we noticed the presence of hydrilla. We saw it last year, but we had stocked additional grass carp in 2018, and we were hoping that they would kind of get a hold of it, and they did not. So we came in and treated it on July 29th.
Just kind of take me back. How did the hydrilla originally get into the lake? It just happened? I mean, people boating in other places bringing it here? Or?
Hydrilla is, it's such an aggressive plant. It could have come in here through the digestive system of a waterfowl. Somebody that was on the Potomac or some other place that had hydrilla came in, and it might have been on their electric motor prop or on the bottom of their boat. There's lots of ways it can get in here. And once it gets in, it establishes really quickly. It can grow inches per day. If it breaks off, those fragments can then reroot. So it has a competitive advantage over the native plants that we want to have in the lake.
Yeah. And we treat it, you said on July 29th. I know we treat it. That's with an aquatic herbicide, right?
Right, yeah. Our contractor, Aquatic Environment Consultants, who's also done our water quality monitoring for years, has an excellent data set on all four of our lakes. They came in and treated their certified applicators for aquatic herbicides. They did not treat all the hydrilla. I mean, what we're trying to do is achieve a balance. So for water bodies in the kind of mid-Atlantic region, you're really trying to get 20 to 30% of the surface of the bottom with aquatic plants, because it helps provide oxygen to the water column, cover for fish and wildlife. So we did not treat all of the hydrilla, and so that was a very intentional move. But there was a ton of hydrilla biomass in the lake, and after the treatment, as we expected, it died and floated. And I was on the lake yesterday evening, and I saw almost no floating hydrilla. So, it did exactly what we expected it to do. Yeah.
You shared with me that you brought in, grass-eating carp. How come that didn't work?
So, if you'll indulge me, there's a quick story on that. Back in the early 80s, when we actually started doing lake management after we got the lakes from the developer, we had a different plant, South American Elodea, that covered 40% of Lake Thoreau and about 40% of Lake Ann. So we were the first shipment of the triploid sterile grass carp to come up from Arkansas. There were another lake in the state and then our two lakes, because you had to get a special, and you still do, have to get a permit from Department of Game and Inland Fisheries to stock them, because they have to be certified as sterile. So we stocked in 1984, it was July 6, 1984, I think. We stocked 2/3 of the recommended rate. Within 2 years, there wasn't a plant in either lake, and it remained plantless for almost 15 years. That's how effective they were. And as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, the goal is to have 20 to 30% coverage. So, again, it's part art and part science on trying to get that balance for all the benefits of the lake: recreation, water quality, fishing, all those kinds of things. So we still do stock the grass carp, but we do it incrementally, so that we don't get into that situation where you basically get rid of every plant in the lake, because that is not where we want to be.
Recently, we've done some dredging in the lake. Did that create any of this problem? Did it stir up the algae or anything to make the bloom worse this year?
Now, generally dredging just removes sediments, and we only do it really in the coves, the areas that are already shallow. And so, that can effectively remove some of the turions or tubers of hydrilla. It can kick up, a little bit of turbidity and probably a little bit of sediment phosphorus. But, when we try to dredge not in the peak season as well, a lot of it depends on the contractor availability. But no, just when the conditions are right, those plants will grow. And again, the algae is always in the lake. And, 2018, we had record rainfall for this area. 2019, I think we were on average, and I think right now we're above average rainfall so far this year.
Yeah.
So those contributing factors, and then you add the hottest July on record. It was a setup for that.
What about, are there mechanical ways to deal with hydrilla to get it under control once it's kind of died and gotten on the surface? Does that make any sense to use some sort of mechanical system to mow it or then maybe harvest it?
We used, in the 80s, 2 years, we used a aquatic plant harvester. Primarily, it was on Lake Audubon because of the Reston triathlon was coming up, and the triathlon helped pay for that at that time. That is a temporary solution, and is one we're investigating right now. Those harvesters they're large, they're expensive, and basically it's a maintenance activity. So it's like cutting your grass. So, if you got hydrilla growing in 10 feet of water and it's all the way up to the surface, all the way through the water column, you can come in and cut it off at 4 or 5 feet, but it grows inches per day. So you may have to come back into that cove in 3 or 4 weeks and do it again.
I've gotten some emails sharing with me that we've seen fish kill and turtle kill. Have any of the aquatic staff, has they been investigating, I think almost at a daily basis?
Right, yeah, Will and Garrett are out all the time. Again, I was out yesterday evening, went around a good bit of the lake. Didn't see one dead fish, didn't see a dead turtle. And I've got a friend who fishes every day, if not 2 or 3 times a day, and he's all over the lake constantly, and he hasn't seen any either.
The hydrilla has basically been, the herbicide has killed it off, it's settling to the bottom now. So that's
correct.
That problem is kind of going away. When can we expect the algae bloom?
Typically they run their course in about 2 to 3 weeks. So if we get some much cooler weather, which I think we're expecting to get some cooler weather, and then we actually get some storms and get some some freshwater input, not the kind of storms that create the runoff but cooler, cloudy weather. What'll happen, the algae will exhaust the nutrients that they have. And really that's the available phosphorus in the top part of the water column. So, 2 to 3 weeks they typically run their course.
So it's safe to say that there's really no treatment we should be doing right now to the algae, just let it run its course.
Right, yeah. So, in fact, Aquatic Environment Consultants was out doing their water quality monitoring on Monday, and then our watershed staff also did a little bit of sampling. And the concern that we have, if we were to come in and treat this algae right now, the biomass, all the trillions of algae cells out there, if they were to die back quickly, we might get a severe oxygen depletion.
That would kill the fish.
That could kill the fish. So right now, and what a lot of people probably don't recognize, is that lakes get separated in the summer. There's a thermocline. So if you've ever gone into a pond or a lake and you said, I'm going to see if I can touch the bottom, and you get down to a certain point and you go, man, it's cold down there, right? You've gone through the thermocline.
Yeah.
And the top layer is the warm water, which typically where light penetrates and where the algae grow and aquatic plants. Below that, there's almost no oxygen. And so typically fish need about 4 milligrams per liter of oxygen. And what we found with the sampling that was done on Monday is that that cutoff point was around 6.5 feet. So that means the vast majority of the water here in the lake doesn't have enough oxygen to support fish or other aquatic creatures. So we don't want to jeopardize that by coming in and treating the algae.
I see. I guess my final question is, I have seen the lake management plan, and we have one for all our lakes. Does it need to be adjusted or updated based on what we've experienced this year?
Well, we should take a look at it all the time. I mean, it's like any plan. You have to revisit it. You know, what happened here is we had probably the most aggressive plant that we've ever seen with the Hydrilla come in, and you know, staff received a ton of complaints. The one benefit of the Hydrilla being here was the water was very clear. But you know, this is a mid-Atlantic lake with a very urban watershed. It will never be like, I'll use the example, Lake Tahoe or something, yeah. Right? So but the aquatic plants help that, and that's why you try to achieve that balance that I spoke about earlier, so that you can have, you know, you have decent clarity while having good ecology for the fish and other creatures in the lake. But in revisiting the plan, you never know when you get a game changer like Hydrilla come in and really take over the lake. So you have to be kind of nimble in your response to those things. And we've tried to be nimble through the years, you know, using grass carp. We're going to look at that. There's a couple other things we're looking at as well, you know, particularly for Lake Thoreau, because it has the most water of any of the lakes. And it has a relatively small watershed at 400 acres versus Lake Audubon, which is, you know, 1,600 acres, which includes Lake Thoreau. So we're looking at perhaps an alum treatment, aluminum sulfate, which actually precipitates out the phosphorus. So they're, for lack of a better word, binded into the sediment, so that during that anaerobic or lack of oxygen decomposition process, which typically releases phosphorus, that would not happen. So we're investigating that as well, and what the cost might be for that.
And that might be something we do next year.
Possibly. Yeah, we have to look at the costs, and there's a fair amount of analysis with the throughput of water for doing that. It wouldn't work in Lake Audubon, because Lake Audubon, it basically replaces its water in a matter of weeks, whereas Lake Thoreau is a matter of months because of the small watershed. So those are some of the things we're looking at.
So just so I can understand, the recommendation is not to treat anything right now to do anything with the algae bloom, because in doing so, killing off the algae could basically take out more oxygen out of the lake. And that could result in killing a lot of the fish and other wildlife that turtles or whatever, in the lake. And while we say don't swim in the lake, some people have been known to do so. We're encouraging right now, while the algae bloom is there, not to swim in the lake, not to get into water. That's correct. Yeah, when I was out on the lake last night, I saw a couple people swimming, and I'm like, you know, not a good time to swim. Yeah. And you shouldn't be swimming anyways. Well, Larry, thank you. This has been very informative. It's helped me a lot to understand what's actually going on. And you know, I know a lot of our Reston members are very concerned about our lakes, and I would encourage anyone who's got any additional concerns or wants more information to reach out either to myself or to Larry. We're both available through email and through our phones. And, so thank you, Larry, and thank you for bringing me up to speed on what's going on. Always love talking about lakes.